All right, guys, so we are going to be working through this long timeline. And as we're doing that, you're going to be working on a handout as well. So here is that handout that you're going to be working with. Now, you have some instructions in Canvas, and those instructions here start with you making a digital copy of this document. So this is your document for the long timeline. Now, what you are going to do is you are going to be highlighting or underlining and changing the font color of some items here. So you have axis powers you're going to be highlighting in pink. So to do that, you would highlight over something, and I'm just going to use this as an example, and then you're going to click the highlighting tool, and you're going to change that to pink, and that changes the font to pink. Now I'm going to go back, the highlight to pink. Now, you may also need to highlight in blue. Use that highlighting tool and choose blue, right? You may need to underline and change the font color. So if we need to underline this and change the font color to green, I'm going to change the text color to green, and then I'm just going to hit the underline, and there we go. Okay, so that's how you're going to change the colors and highlight as necessary. Now your instructions are, you are highlighting axis powers in pink. I'll explain what those are as we're going through. You're highlighting allied powers in blue. And then for invasions and victories, you're going to underline and change the font color to pink if they are axis power invasions and victories. And then if they are allied powers, invasions, and victories, you're going to underline and change the font color to blue for those. Okay. Declarations of war are going to be highlighted in green, and then treaties and pacts are going to be changed to green and underlined. Okay. This is available in Canvas, these instructions, so having that tab open might be helpful. But really, I'm just going to tell you as we go through this timeline. All right, so like I said, you'll want your timeline document open in one tab, and then you'll want your this video open in another, so that you can pause and make sure that you get those items marked as we go through the timeline. All right, you ready? Here we go. So again, night, this is our Holocaust background here. I'm going to open that up in presentation mode. And I am going to move myself over here so I'm a little bit more out of the way. Good. And then we are going to get started here. All right. So again, this is the long version of the timeline. Don't let that worry you. It's not that much longer as far as time frame goes than the short form. Here are your instructions again. If you need them, but again, this, don't worry about that. But these are the instructions that you're going to follow. Okay, so let's see. Starting in January 30th, 1933, Hitler comes to power in Germany. And we see Hitler here. We've seen him before. This is, again, a reminder of that short form. But then we have the beginning of the war. So we're skipping all of that rise to power of Hitler in this timeline, and we're going to focus primarily on World War II. So what was going on in World War II alongside what we've learned about going on with the Holocaust. So on March of 1939, the German troops occupy Czechoslovakia. So you're going to go over to your document and you are going to change the font color and underline Czechoslovakia in pink. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how that's going to look. I'm going to go to Czechoslovakia. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to change that to pink. Oh, sorry, not highlight. I'm going to change the text color to pink, and I'm going to underline that. So it's going to look like that. Okay? And then I'm going to go back to my presentation here, and resume. All right. So in 1939, German troops occupy Czechoslovakia. This is their first move into the war. Germany invades Czechoslovakia. Okay. And then what happened shortly after that, Russia is not real thrilled with Germany invading Czechoslovakia. Russia is concerned that they are going to make an attempt to invade Russia. So Russia says to Germany, listen, we won't mess with you. We'll leave you alone. You can do whatever you want in Europe. Just don't cross our borders. If you don't cross our borders, we're good. We don't want a war. And Germany signs that German-Soviet pact. So you're going to highlight that, right? Sorry, not highlight. You're going to change the color of the font to green, and you're going to underline German-Soviet pact for August 1939. And then Germany, on September 1st, 1939, German troops occupied Poland. So they moved from Czechoslovakia right into Poland. And at that point, France and Britain declare war against Germany. Okay. Now, when they invaded Czechoslovakia, they were hesitant. They didn't want to get into another war. So France and Britain just kind of held back. But eventually, they can't let it slide. When Germany invades Poland, they declare war. So highlight France and Britain. Those are our allied powers, and they declare war against Germany. So you're going to highlight that because it's a declaration of war. Then we have Germany invading Denmark and Norway. So we have these invasions. We're going to change the font color of Denmark and Norway to pink, and we're going to underline those. So Germany is continuing. In April 1940, they're continuing those invasions. And then in May of 1940, it just keeps going. They are rolling to France, Holland, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And remember, it only takes them like 16 days to invade France, no matter how many Maginot lines France set up. Why? Because Germany just went around them instead of going through them. So we have these continued invasions. Make sure that you're changing those font colors and underlining those. And then we have Italy declaring war on France and Britain. Okay, in June 10th, 1940, Italy declares war on France and Britain. Now, at this point, Italy hadn't joined Germany. Okay, but Italy was worried. They saw the writing on the wall. They knew what Germany was doing, and so they made the choice, and we've heard this before, right? If you can't beat them, join them. And that's what Italy does. They declare war on France and Britain, essentially joining with Germany to be on those Axis powers, right? So that happens on June 10th, 1940. Again, highlight that. On June 22nd of 1940, France signs an armistice with the Third Reich. The Third Reich being the Nazi Party, Germany, right? And so France signs an armistice or a surrender to Germany. Now, be aware that they sign the surrender that the French government is giving up. The military is giving up. But keep in mind that the French resistance, which was civilians basically, they were continuing to fight. And they made holding France very difficult. So they were basically rebellious groups within France that were making things very difficult for Germany to maintain control. In August of 1940, Japan, Italy, and Germany signed the tripartite or the Axis Pact. So what Germany was doing in Europe, Japan was interested in the Pacific. And what I mean by that is not the Holocaust. They were not looking at genocide, but they were looking at taking over and forming an empire. So Japan wanted to take over the Pacific. They were trying to gain power there. And Germany was taking over Europe. and Japan and Germany joined together in this tripartite pact with Italy. Be aware that Italy was not a particularly powerful country, but they are just staying safe by joining with, at this point, these strong powers of Germany and Japan. Then in August through October of 1940, Germany bombs English towns in the Battle of Britain. And you guys may remember this term. These were what were referred to as the blitzkriegs, or lightning warfare, these mass bombings. These bombers here that you see would open up the bottom, and bombs would just fall out by the hundreds. And so they would fly over an area. They wouldn't target. Remember, there was no precision here. They would just drop bombs, hundreds of bombs on these cities. All right, so in 1940, Germany was getting tired of Italy. Italy was just kind of hanging out, playing it safe, and Germany said, listen, if you're going to be a part of us, you got to put in some of the work. So Italy attacks Greece to do their part in this war, their part with the Axis powers, and that was in October of 1940. Now, in November, within a month, Greece is able to drive the Italians out. So the Italians' show of force was kind of laughable. They were not able to hold Italy. They weren't able to hold Greece. Italy wasn't able to hold Greece. And so Greece pushed the Italians out of their country. Now, in January through May of 1941, Germany continues its spread, and they take over Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, Greece. So Germany basically says, if you can't do it, we'll do it ourselves, to Italy, Greece, and Crete. So make sure that you're underlining and changing the font colors of those. In April of 1941, USSR signs a neutrality pact with Japan. So remember, Russia has signed this pact with Germany, saying as long as you don't cross our borders, we won't cross yours. And so they tell Japan the same thing. Listen, we're not getting involved. We're going to stay neutral. Just don't come into our country. Don't try to invade us, and we'll just let you do whatever you want. And then in June 22nd, 1941, Germany attacks Russia. This was Germany's plan all along. Russia was too big and dangerous to have as an enemy early on. But now that Germany has taken over so much of Europe, they don't have to worry about Russia sneaking up behind them and attacking them. So they're building up their front to attack Russia over the course of these months, and able to finally be able to attack Russia. So we're highlighting Germany attacks and underline and change the font color of USSR. August 30th, 1941 begins the 900-day siege of Leningrad, Russia, by the Germans. So a siege is basically a surrounding of a city or a castle or what have you, depending on the time period, and not letting anyone in and out. All right. So a city can hold itself there for a while, but eventually they're going to run out of supplies. And this was a 900-day siege of Leningrad. So, guys, fairly recently we have experienced some strange historical events, right? So imagine the shortages that we've experienced during the beginning of COVID. Now imagine no resupply coming in. Okay? So you have mass starvation, health issues, you have disease spreading. There are stories some confirmed, many unconfirmed, but plausible, of cannibalism. People starving so much that they resort to cannibalism in this siege, because we're talking about nearly 3 years of 2.5 years of not getting any supplies in and out, and you can only grow so much in Leningrad. So this was a horrible siege that the people of Leningrad had to face. Now, up until this point, the United States wasn't involved in World War II. We were aware of what was going on, and there was some stuff happening behind the scenes. But on December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, Japan attacks the U.S. base of Pearl Harbor in the Hawaiian Islands. Okay. And so this seemed like an unprovoked attack. What Japan referred to it as, they saw it as an attack that would stop us from eventually attacking them. So it was this defensive move by this offensive attack. Japan was concerned because Pearl Harbor was close enough for attacks from the United States to be staged out of for Japan, and so they attacked Pearl Harbor. And they did this with what were known as the kamikaze pilots. And these pilots were flying planes that only had enough fuel to get them to Pearl Harbor. So going into this, they knew it was a suicide mission. And the last weapon that they had in their arsenal was their own plane. So they attacked the Navy base. They attacked and destroyed ships. And when they ran out of fuel and they ran out of weaponry, bullets and that sort of thing, then bullets and bombs. Then once they ran out of those, they piloted their planes into the ships to cause as much damage as possible. So this attack was essentially the beginning of the war for the United States. It was shortly thereafter that we declared war on Japan and joined in World War II. All right. So that was December 7th was the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and December 11th, Germany and Italy joined with Japan in declaring war on the United States, and the United States declares war on the USSR and Japan. All right. Sorry, I may have gone a little too fast there. So we're going to highlight both of those there. Next, we get through January through May of 1942. There's the Japanese conquests in the Pacific. They include Malaya, Singapore, and the Philippines. So change the font color and underline those. And next, we have the Allies begin bombing German cities. So at this point, the United States, Russia, and Great Britain start giving back to the Germans what they had got. So they start flying bombers over German cities and dropping bombs over them. You might remember hearing something about people celebrating the bombing of these German cities in response to things like Coventry. I think you may remember hearing about this in a separate piece. All right. In April of 1942, they do the same thing in Tokyo. Here is a shot of those planes dropping hundreds of bombs over those cities. So this is not, again, targeted attacks. These are just large-scale, drop a lot of bombs and hope they hit stuff that you want them to hit. In June of 1942, the Allied forces begin to fight the Japanese in the Pacific. So we start to see the battles happening on the ground there. And then from June 4th through 7th, 1942, we see the U.S. air and sea victory in the Battle of Midway. a small area of land in the middle of the Pacific with strategic significance. It was called the Battle of Midway because Midway was an island in the middle, right? In between, midway between our forces and theirs. So whoever held that island had a strategic place to refuel, to stage for battle, and prepare. So winning that battle was a huge turning point. Then in October of 1942, the United States and Australian troops defeat the Japanese at the island of Guadalcanal. And this is the largest of the Solomon Islands. The British forces also defeated the Germans at the Battle of Alamein in Egypt. A lot of times students forget that there was that war was going on in North Africa as well. If it helps you remember, several of the Indiana Jones movies take place in North Africa, and he seems to always be running into Nazis while he's there. All right. On November 8th, 1942, the Allies land in North Africa. All right. So we have the British forces there in Alamein. We have the landing in North Africa. And then in January of 1943, there's the defeat of the German army in Stalingrad. And the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising begins. We're going to talk more about that later. So we're starting to see our timeline turn a little bit blue, right? Things are changing. There's a shift in the battles here. Russia is now defeating Germany in these battles. Again, we have another defeat where in July of 1943, the USSR defeats the German army at the Battle of Kursk. And then July 9th, 1943, the Allies land in Sicily. Okay. And then, so that was July 9th, 1943. And then on September 3rd, 1943, Italy signs an armistice with the Allies. So once the Allied powers, the United States, Britain, Russia, once they invade Italy, Italy surrenders. It doesn't take them long to surrender. And then that is September 3rd, 1943. Then on October 13th, just over a month later, Italy declares war on Germany. Okay, so some people find this humorous and they say that Italy was just playing both sides, joining whoever was going to keep them safe. Others argue that Italy only joined Germany in the first place to kind of save themselves, to protect their people. And really they wanted to be going after Hitler to begin with. We can give Italy credit for aiding in many battles afterwards, after they join the Allied powers. So really, I'll leave it to the historians and you guys to do a little more research on that if you're interested. From June through October of 1944, the Allies defeat Germany and France and Belgium. So they liberate France, and as they're doing this, the Allied powers are getting stronger, right? Because they're freeing these countries, and then people from these countries are joining up to help. June 6, 1944, the Allies land in Normandy, France, and this was D-Day. And if you've seen the movie Saving Private Ryan, this is the opening segment. This is a huge turning point in the war. On June 22nd of 1944, the USSR launches an attack on the Germans from the east. Okay, so what we have is Russia coming in from the east, and France, Britain, and the United States and Italy coming in from the west, and they're kind of pushing back. So Germany has been expanding out, but as they expand, their army gets thinner, right? They're spreading out, and so they're not as concentrated. So now when they're being attacked, they need to regroup, and so they're being pushed back towards Germany. In July of 1944, some high-ranking German officers attempt to assassinate Hitler. Hitler's having a meeting in a bunker, and one of those high-ranking officers brings a bomb into the bunker. And the only thing that saved Hitler's life in that bombing was the fact that someone had opened a window. Had that window been closed, it would have contained the blast enough to kill everyone in the room. But because the window was open, that the pressure from the blast escaped, and Hitler survived that assassination attempt. If you're interested in this story, there's a movie called Valkyrie that goes into these German officers attempting to assassinate Hitler. They see what's coming, and this is their attempt to stop it, to stop Hitler and hopefully save their country. In August 15th of 1944, the Allies land in the south of France and they defeat the Germans. So they have successfully invaded France, pushed Germans out of France. August 25th, 1944, the United States lands in the Philippines. So they're continuing their war in the Pacific. February 4th through 11th, the British, the United States, and the Soviet leaders meet at the Yalta Conference, and this is where they kind of make their plans for the end of the war. This is an iconic picture because we have Joseph Stalin, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill all together. And the reason why that I want you to think about how important this was is at this point, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was wheelchair bound. He was unable to walk. And it was, there was concern that he might look less powerful. He might not look like an equal to Stalin and Churchill. So Stalin and Churchill agreed for this photograph that everyone would be seated, which was not standard at the time. But it was this show of everyone being on equal footing here, that they were all seated for that picture. Just a little historical context to this one. All right. In March of 1945, the Allies cross the Rhine and break through German lines. Okay. And so basically that we have now invaded Germany. Okay, so we push them back, not just to their borders, but past their borders at this point. And then on April 30th, 1945, Hitler commits suicide in his bunker. He knows that they've lost. He knows that he isn't willing to be put on trial for war crimes, and he commits suicide in his bunker. And then May 8th, 1945, Germany surrenders. So again, change the font color, underline that in green. And then August 6th, 1945, the United States drops the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. All right, need to jump back a little bit here because this was not, it wasn't that simple. The United States continued to fight. The war in May of 1945 was not over in the Pacific. Japan continued to fight. Russia, Great Britain, and the United States continued to fight with Japan, and we were not winning. Nobody was winning. There was a lot of death on both sides, and economists and strategists, military strategists, saw no way for the war to end anytime soon. The expectation was it would just continue indefinitely with just amassing a great deal of deaths. So the United States had perfected the atomic bomb at this point. We were ready, and the United States let Japan know. They said, they essentially called up the leaders of Japan and said, we have a bomb that will destroy a whole city, and we are going to drop it on Hiroshima. Surrender, or that's what's going to happen. And Japan who had a history of a culture that that really did not accept surrender and defeat, refused to surrender. Okay, so on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the bomb, the atomic bomb, on Hiroshima. And then we, again, called up Japan and said, we have another bomb. We will drop it on another city. Surrender, or that's what will happen. And then on August 9th, 1945, the United States dropped a bomb on Nagasaki. Now, Japan refused to surrender. And so on August 9th, the United States dropped another bomb. And then after that, the United States, again, contacted Japan and said, we have another bomb, surrender, or we will drop it on another city. And on August 15th, 1945, Japan surrendered, thus ending World War II. We did not have another bomb. At that point, the United States had only created the 2 atomic bombs, codenamed Fat Man and Little Boy. And those were the 2 that we dropped on those 2 cities. So our threat for a third bomb was a bluff. But at that point, Japan was so devastated by the loss of these 2 cities that they refused to continue fighting. Just a little Arizona history here. This is Admiral McCain. If you're familiar with John McCain, that is his father. And John McCain himself is somewhere in the crowd back here. So for those of you who are familiar with John McCain, he has a historical tie to the surrender of Japan and the end of World War II. All right, so that is your long timeline. If you missed any of the highlights or underlines or font color changes, take the time to go back through the presentation, the video, making sure that you've highlighted all of those items that you need to highlight, and you have completed the assignment. Once you've done that, you are going to post this assignment to Canvas. So you're going to post your document back to Canvas with those highlighted changes. Take a moment to look at your timeline, scroll through it, and see where the colors start to change. Okay. Often students think that the change in the war happened because the United States joined in, and that the rest of the world would have lost World War II if it wasn't for us. So we essentially won it. And historians often say that's a very simplistic view of it. Yes, when we joined the war, the tide changed, but primarily that was because Russia and England just needed a little more help. If it was just the United States without Russia and Great Britain, most believe that there's no way that we could have won the war on our own. So it was a world war and an effort by many countries, not just the the Allied powers, but many, that led to the end of World War II. All right, so make sure that you've got all of those notes and you've posted your assignment, and you are all set. We'll talk about this more in class.